My name is Jake Fairmont, and I'm about to tell you how I destroyed my wife's life in front of half our neighborhood. But first, let me set the scene properly, because context matters when you're planning revenge. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. It was a Tuesday night in suburban Dallas, the kind of evening where the air conditioning units hum like mechanical crickets, and the smell of barbecue drifts between houses worth more than most people make in 5 years. I was under the hood of Mrs. Peterson's Mustang in my garage, hands deep in engine grease, when I heard my wife Chloe through the kitchen window. "If I had a do-over," she was saying into her phone, voice light with laughter, "I'd never marry Jake. God, what was I thinking?" Nice to know where you stand after 15 years, 2 dogs and a mortgage that could choke a horse. I straightened up slowly, wiping my hands on an oil-stained rag. The garage felt suddenly quiet except for the distant hum of our central air and Chloe's continued conversation. She was probably talking to Rita, her best friend and professional gossip distributor for our entire subdivision. "He's just so ordinary," Chloe continued. "Trevor keeps saying I deserve better." Trevor. That name had been popping up in conversations a lot lately. Trevor Miles, the flashy real estate agent who worked in the same office complex as Chloe's law firm. Trevor with his BMW and his expensive cologne and his habit of showing up at our barbecues uninvited. I walked to the kitchen window and peered through the blinds. Chloe sat at our granite island, still in her power suit from work, gesturing animatedly as she talked. At 35, she was still beautiful in that sharp, calculated way that had first attracted me. Every blonde hair in place, makeup perfect despite a 12-hour day, posture straight as a courtroom argument. "The game night at Will and Tara's is this Saturday," she said. "Trevor's coming too. It'll be fun." Fun. Right. I'd been noticing things for months now. The late nights at the office that smelled like expensive cologne instead of legal briefs. The new gym membership she'd bought herself, claiming she needed to stay competitive in a young profession. The way she'd started suggesting I join her at the gym, with that particular smile that meant she thought I was getting soft around the middle. Most telling of all were the little comments. Death by 1,000 cuts, each one designed to chip away at my confidence. "Jake, maybe you should dress up more when we go out." "Jake," Trevor was saying how important it is for couples to have shared interests. "Jake, don't you think you're getting a little too comfortable? I'm not stupid. I own my own auto repair shop, employ 6 guys, and clear more money than most of the lawyers in Chloe's firm. I might work with my hands, but my brain works just fine." Saturday night arrived with the oppressive heat that makes Dallas summers legendary. Will and Tara Morrison lived 4 houses down in a McMansion identical to ours, except for the color of the shutters. Their game nights had become a monthly tradition among our little circle of suburban professionals. I showered carefully, put on khakis and a polo shirt that Chloe had bought me for Christmas. She wore a sundress that cost more than most people's rent, her hair swept up to show off the diamond earrings I'd given her for our anniversary. "You look nice," I told her as we walked down the sidewalk. "Thanks," she replied without looking at me, already scanning the Morrisons' driveway to see who else had arrived. Trevor's BMW sat gleaming under their porch light like a beacon of everything I apparently wasn't. The Morrisons' living room buzzed with conversation and the kind of nervous energy that comes from mixing alcohol with people who see each other at the grocery store. Will, an insurance adjuster with thinning hair and a nervous laugh, handed me a beer while Tara, his wife of 12 years, fussed over cheese plates and made sure everyone had somewhere to sit. Rita arrived fashionably late, as always, her red hair perfectly styled and her dress just tight enough to remind everyone she was still single and proud of it. She made a beeline for Chloe, and they immediately huddled together like co-conspirators. Trevor walked in behind Rita, and I watched my wife's entire demeanor change. Her posture straightened, her smile became more genuine, and she actually laughed at something he said before he'd even finished saying it. "Jake!" Trevor boomed, extending his hand with the kind of aggressive friendliness that always made my teeth itch. "Good to see you, buddy. How's the car business?" "Can't complain," I replied, shaking his hand and noting how soft his palms were. "How's real estate?" "Booming, absolutely booming. This market's insane. I just closed on a $2 million property in Preston Hollow. Cash deal." Of course he did. We settled into our usual game night routine. Will had prepared trivia questions, Tara kept the drinks flowing, and everyone pretended this was about friendly competition instead of suburban status warfare. The questions started easy. What year was the first iPhone released? Name the capital of Montana. Which friend's character worked at Bloomingdale's? Then Will pulled out a card and grinned. "Okay, this one's for the couples. Ladies first. Would you marry your husband again, knowing what you know now?" Tara giggled and looked at Will. "Absolutely. He's stuck with me forever." Rita rolled her eyes. "Thank God I don't have to answer that one." All eyes turned to Chloe. She took a sip of her wine, glanced at Trevor, and smiled. "Absolutely not," she said without hesitation. "Never again." The room erupted in laughter. Will nearly choked on his beer. Tara gasped and covered her mouth. Rita cackled like she'd just heard the funniest joke of her life. I smiled calmly and reached into my back pocket. "Good," I said, producing a manila envelope, "because I brought these." The laughter died instantly. I slid the envelope across the coffee table to Chloe. Her face went from flushed with wine and laughter to pale as courthouse marble. "Divorce papers," I announced cheerfully. "Already filled out. I just need your signature." You could have heard a pin drop in Preston Hollow. Chloe stared at the envelope like it might explode. "Jake, what are you— You think this is a joke, Chloe?" I interrupted, still smiling. "I've been tracking your snide remarks and late nights for months. Turns out, when someone tells you exactly how they feel about you, it's smart to listen." Trevor's face had gone an interesting shade of green. I locked eyes with him and let my smile get a little sharper. "Don't worry, Trev. I'm sure she'll have plenty of time for your professional consultations once she's single again." The ride home was silent, except for the air conditioning and Chloe's occasional sharp intake of breath as she tried to figure out what to say. I drove carefully, hands steady on the wheel, while she clutched the unopened envelope in her lap like it was radioactive. "Jake," she finally said as I pulled into our driveway. "We need to talk." "No," I replied, turning off the engine. "We really don't." I'd spent the last 3 months preparing for this moment. While Chloe thought I was just puttering around the garage and watching too much television, I'd been documenting everything. Every late night, every mysterious phone call, every receipt that didn't match her stories. The burner phone I'd found hidden in her car's glove compartment had been particularly illuminating. Sunday morning, I woke up early and got to work. First stop, our joint bank accounts. I transferred my half into a new account at a different bank, one where Chloe wasn't authorized. Then I changed the passwords on our streaming services, our home security system, and the shared credit cards. Chloe discovered my handiwork when her gym membership card was declined at 9 a.m. "Jake!" she screamed from the kitchen. "What did you do?" I was in the garage organizing tools I'd been meaning to organize for years. Amazing how productive you can be when you're not wasting energy on a marriage. "Made some financial adjustments," I called back. "Don't worry. I left enough in the joint account to cover your half of this month's bills. After that, you're on your own." She appeared in the doorway wearing her workout clothes, face flushed with anger and panic. "You can't just cut off my access to our money." "Our money?" I looked up from the socket wrench set I was arranging. Funny thing about that. Turns out, most of our money comes from my business. Your salary barely covers your shopping habits. I'm a lawyer, Jake. I know my rights. And I'm a business owner who's been married to a lawyer for 15 years. I know mine too. That afternoon, while Chloe was at the office trying to figure out how to afford lunch, I paid a visit to our home security system. We'd installed cameras 2 years ago after a rash of break-ins in the neighborhood. Chloe had insisted on the most expensive package, with cameras covering every entrance and motion sensors throughout the house. What she didn't know was that I'd been reviewing the footage for weeks. The camera in our kitchen had a perfect view of the back door. The one in the living room covered the front entrance, and the motion sensors kept detailed logs of when doors opened and closed, even when we thought no one was watching. Like last Tuesday night, when the back door opened at 2:17 a.m. and closed again at 2:43 a.m. Or the previous Thursday, when someone entered through the front at 1:55 a.m. and left at 2:38 a.m. Both times, Chloe had been asleep in our bed, and both times, her car had never left the driveway. Someone else had been coming and going from our house while I slept. I'd started sleeping lighter after that, and sure enough, this past Thursday, I'd heard the soft click of the back door around 2 in the morning. I'd slipped out of bed, crept to the window, and watched Trevor Miles sneak across our backyard like a teenager avoiding his parents. Tonight, I decided, would be different. I positioned myself in the garage with the lights off and the door cracked open just enough to see the backyard. At 2:15 a.m., right on schedule, a figure slipped through the gate and headed for our back door. I waited until he was halfway across the yard, then stepped out of the garage. "Evening, Trevor." He froze like a deer in headlights, then spun around with his hands up. "Jake, Jesus, you scared me. I was just what? Taking a midnight stroll through my backyard?" Even in the dim light from the neighbor's security lamp, I could see him sweating. He was dressed in dark clothes, probably thinking that made him invisible. Instead, it just made him look guilty. "I can explain," he started. "I'm sure you can. You're in sales, right? Probably great at explaining things." I started walking toward him, slowly, like I had all the time in the world. He took a step backward. "Look, Jake, this isn't what you think." "Really? Because I think you've been sneaking into my house to screw my wife while I sleep upstairs. Am I wrong?" He took another step back and bumped into our patio furniture. "It's not like that." "No? Then what's it like, Trevor?" I was close enough now to see the panic in his eyes, close enough to smell his expensive cologne mixed with nervous sweat. "She's unhappy, Jake. She deserves better than—" That's when I grabbed him. I'm not a big man, but 15 years of working on cars had given me strong hands and quick reflexes. I caught Trevor by his shirt front and spun him around, slamming him against his BMW hard enough to set off the car alarm. "Better than what?" I asked, my face inches from his. "Better than a husband who works for a living? Better than someone who doesn't sneak around like a coward?" The car alarm was wailing now, lights flashing. Neighbors' windows were starting to light up. "I'm sorry," Trevor gasped. "I'm sorry, okay? It just happened." "Things like this don't just happen, Trevor. They're choices, bad choices." I reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out his phone. The screen showed a text conversation with someone named C, clearly Chloe, though she was listed under a fake name. "Next time you want to make bad choices," I said, pocketing his phone, "do it somewhere else. And Trevor?" "Yeah? If I catch you on my property again, we're going to have a very different kind of conversation." I released him and stepped back. He stumbled toward the driver's side of his car, fumbling for his keys with shaking hands. "Tell my wife I said hello," I called as he drove away, his car alarm still blaring. Monday morning brought the kind of satisfaction that comes from a good night's sleep and a plan coming together. I'd spent Sunday reviewing Trevor's phone, which contained enough evidence to end both his real estate career and his marriage. Yes, marriage. Turned out Trevor had a wife named Linda, who lived in Plano and thought her husband was working late showings. Chloe left for work without speaking to me, which was fine. We were past the point of morning pleasantries. I had coffee with my friend Ricky at his gym. a no-nonsense place that smelled like honest sweat instead of fancy cleaning products. Ricky Torres had been my best friend since high school, back when he was heading for the Olympics in boxing and I was learning to fix cars from my dad. Life had taken us in different directions. A knee injury ended his Olympic dreams, and he'd opened the gym instead, but we'd stayed close. "You look different," Ricky said, studying my face over his protein shake. "Less defeated. I filed for divorce Saturday night." "About damn time." Ricky had never liked Chloe, though he'd been too polite to say so until now. "She's been treating you like garbage for years. It gets better. She's been cheating with that real estate guy, Trevor." Ricky's expression darkened. At 42, he still looked like he could step into a ring and do serious damage. "You want me to have a conversation with him?" "Thanks, but I've got it handled. Actually, I was hoping you could help me with something else." "Name it." "I need to get back in shape. Nothing dramatic, just enough to handle myself if things get physical." Ricky grinned. "Now you're talking." We spent the next hour working on basic self-defense. How to throw a proper punch without breaking my hand. How to use leverage instead of strength. How to stay calm when someone bigger was trying to intimidate me. "The thing about bullies," Ricky said as I practiced footwork, "is they're used to people backing down. Soon as you stand up to them, they fold like cheap suits." That afternoon, I put his theory to the test. I'd been thinking about Chloe's law firm, a mid-sized practice that specialized in corporate law and personal injury cases. They had a strict policy about employees using company resources for personal matters. I knew because Chloe had complained about it plenty of times. Using Trevor's phone, I'd found emails between him and Chloe that had been sent from her work account. Detailed discussions about their affair, plans for meetings, and even some photos that definitely weren't work-related. I printed everything out, put it in a manila envelope, and addressed it to Chloe's boss, Margaret Chen. Then I drove to their office building and dropped it off with the receptionist. "Please make sure Ms. Chen gets this today," I told the young woman at the front desk. "It's time-sensitive." "Of course, sir. Can I tell her who it's from?" "A concerned citizen." By Thursday, the neighborhood gossip network was buzzing. Rita had somehow gotten hold of the story, probably from Chloe herself, and was spreading it around like wildfire. The affair, the divorce papers at game night, even my confrontation with Trevor in the backyard. But the version Rita was telling painted me as the villain. Poor Chloe, trapped in a loveless marriage with a controlling husband who couldn't handle her success. Poor Trevor, just trying to help a friend in need. I decided it was time to correct the narrative. Trevor was holding an open house that Saturday in one of the fancy neighborhoods near White Rock Lake. I knew because I'd seen the listing in his text messages. Big colonial house, asking price north of $800,000, the kind of place where serious buyers came with pre-approval letters and real estate agents brought clients to impress them. I showed up at 2 o'clock with a folder full of printouts and Ricky as backup. The house was gorgeous, I had to admit. Hardwood floors, granite countertops, a kitchen that belonged in a magazine. Trevor had set up a guest book by the front door and was working the crowd like the professional salesman he was. "Jake," he said when he spotted me, his voice tight with forced cheerfulness. "What a surprise. Are you and Chloe looking to upgrade?" "Actually, Trevor, I wanted to talk to you about your business practices." The conversation around us started to quiet down. Other potential buyers were beginning to pay attention. "My business practices?" "Yeah. Specifically, your habit of selling houses while you're busy breaking up homes." Trevor's face went pale. "I don't know what you're talking about." I opened my folder and pulled out a photo, one of the ones from his text conversation with Chloe. I'd blurred out the explicit parts, but it was clearly them together in what looked like a hotel room. "This is you with my wife, isn't it, Trevor?" Dead silence in the room now. A well-dressed woman near the kitchen island gasped audibly. "Jake, please," Trevor said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Not here." Why not here? This is where you work, right? Where you build trust with clients. I just think people should know what kind of man they're doing business with. I pulled out another photo, this one showing Trevor and Chloe in what was clearly our backyard. This is my house, Trevor. My backyard. My wife. While I was sleeping upstairs, you were down here making yourself at home. You're crazy, Trevor said, but his voice was shaking. Am I? Let me ask the folks here a question. I turned to address the room. How many of you are married? Several hands went up hesitantly. How would you feel if you found out your real estate agent was the kind of person who sneaks around with other people's spouses? Would that make you trust him with the biggest purchase of your life? A middle-aged man near the fireplace shook his head and headed for the door. Others started following. Stop, Trevor said desperately. Just stop, okay? You're ruining everything. I'm not ruining anything, Trevor. I'm just telling the truth. You're the one who made the choices. That's when he tried to grab me. It was clumsy and desperate, a wild swing that telegraphed itself from a mile away. I stepped aside like Ricky had taught me, caught Trevor's wrist, and used his own momentum to send him stumbling backward into the kitchen island. He tripped over his own feet and went down hard, knocking over a vase of flowers and sending water cascading across the granite countertop. Maybe you should stick to selling houses, Trevor, I said as he struggled to get back up. You're not very good at the physical stuff. The room had cleared out except for Ricky and one elderly woman who was filming everything with her phone. This is going on Facebook, she announced cheerfully. My daughter's going to love this. Trevor was soaked, humiliated, and probably out several potential sales. He looked up at me from the floor, water dripping from his hair, and I saw something I'd never seen before in his eyes. Fear. Stay away from my wife, I told him. Stay away from my house. And Trevor, you might want to give Linda a call. I have a feeling she's got some questions for you. His face went white. How do you know about Linda? I smiled and headed for the door. I know lots of things, Trevor. The question is, what are you going to do about it? By the following Monday, Chloe's world was crumbling in spectacular fashion. Her boss had called her into a disciplinary meeting about the inappropriate use of company resources. Rita, sensing which way the wind was blowing, had started distancing herself and was now dating someone from Chloe's rival law firm. The video of Trevor's humiliation at the open house had gone viral in our local real estate community, effectively ending his career. But Chloe wasn't going down without a fight. You think you're so clever? She said Tuesday morning as I made coffee in our kitchen. She was dressed for work, but looked like she hadn't slept. You think you can destroy my life and just walk away? I'm not destroying anything, I replied calmly. I'm just making sure people know who they're dealing with. I'll take you for everything in the divorce, the house, your business, everything. I turned to look at her, coffee mug in hand. With what lawyer, Chloe? Who's going to represent you after what happened at your firm? Her face flushed red. There are other firms. Sure, and they'll all want a retainer up front. How's your cash flow these days? She stormed out without another word. That afternoon, I got a call from Will Morrison. Jake, we need to talk, he said. His voice sounded strained. What's on your mind, Will? This thing with you and Chloe. It's getting out of hand. Tara thinks maybe we should all sit down and work this out like adults. Work what out? She cheated, I filed for divorce. Pretty straightforward. Come on, man. Marriages go through rough patches. Maybe you two can get counseling or something. I almost laughed. Will, did you know Trevor's married? Silence on the other end. Did you know he's been sneaking into my house at night for months? Did you know Chloe's been using her work email to send him naked pictures? Jesus, Jake, I don't need to hear. No, you do need to hear it. Because you and Tara are suggesting I should work things out with someone who's been lying to my face for months. Would you work it out if Tara was screwing around behind your back? Another long silence. Look, Will finally said. Tara's organizing a sort of intervention, tomorrow night at the community center. Just our friend group, maybe a counselor. A chance for everyone to air things out. Everyone? You, Chloe, Trevor, Rita, me and Tara. Maybe a few other people from the neighborhood. I smiled. That sounds perfect, Will. What time? 7 o'clock, conference room B. I'll be there. I spent Tuesday night preparing, not for counseling or mediation, but for the final act of my revenge. I had boxes of evidence now, printed emails, photos, bank records showing unexplained expenses, phone logs, security camera footage, everything carefully organized and labeled. Most importantly, I had Trevor's confession. During our confrontation at the open house, the elderly woman hadn't been the only one recording. I'd had my phone in my shirt pocket, audio recording app running. Trevor's admission that he'd been having an affair, his desperate attempts to justify it, his panic when I mentioned his wife, all of it captured in crystal clear digital audio. Wednesday evening, I arrived at the community center early. Conference room B was one of those generic meeting spaces with fluorescent lights, folding chairs, and a projector screen that had seen better days. I'd called ahead and reserved the projector, telling them I needed it for a family presentation. Will and Tara arrived first, looking nervous and overdressed for what they thought would be a casual mediation session. Then came Rita, who'd apparently decided to treat this like a social event and brought wine. Chloe showed up fashionably late, probably hoping to make an entrance. Trevor slunk in last, looking like he'd rather be anywhere else on Earth. Okay, Tara said once everyone was seated. I think we should start with… Actually, I interrupted, standing up and walking to the projector. I'd like to start with a presentation. I'd spent hours putting together a slideshow that told the complete story of Chloe and Trevor's affair. Photos, screenshots of text messages, bank records, security camera timestamps, everything laid out in chronological order like a prosecutor's closing argument. Jake, what are you doing? Chloe asked, but I could hear the panic creeping into her voice. I'm giving everyone the full picture, I replied, dimming the lights. Since we're all here to work things out, I thought it was important that everyone understand exactly what we're working with. The first slide was a photo of Chloe and Trevor at a restaurant downtown, taken from Trevor's phone. They were holding hands across the table, looking at each other like teenagers in love. This was taken 3 months ago, I announced, while I was at home watching our daughter. Tara gasped. Will's mouth fell open. Rita looked like she was watching a car accident. The next slide showed text messages between Chloe and Trevor, discussing when and where to meet. The one after that showed credit card receipts for hotel rooms that Chloe had paid for with our joint account. Jake, stop this, Chloe said, standing up. This is insane. Sit down, Chloe. We're just getting started. The slideshow continued. Security camera footage of Trevor sneaking through our backyard, photos of them together in what was clearly a hotel room, text messages where they discussed how pathetic and clueless I was. By the time I got to the audio recording from the open house, Trevor was slumped in his chair like a deflated balloon, and Chloe was crying angry tears. You want to know the best part? I said, as the recording played Trevor's voice admitting to the affair. Trevor's been telling his wife he's been working late showings. Linda, that's his wife, for those keeping track, she thinks he's been showing houses to young couples looking to start families. I clicked to the next slide, which showed a photo of Trevor and Linda at their wedding, pulled from his social media. Turns out Trevor's been lying to everyone, his wife, his clients, his business partners. Really makes you wonder what else he's been dishonest about, doesn't it? That's enough, Chloe shouted, lunging toward the projector. I stepped between her and the equipment. We're not done yet. The final slides were the most damaging. Screenshots of emails where Chloe had used her law firm's resources to help Trevor with personal legal issues. Photos of them together at work functions where they were clearly more than just friends. And finally, a recording I'd made of Chloe on the phone with Rita, discussing how they planned to take me for everything in the divorce. When the lights came back up, the room was dead silent except for the sound of Chloe sobbing. So, I said, looking around the room. Anyone still think we should work this out? Will and Tara were staring at their hands. Rita was filming everything with her phone, probably already planning how to spin this on social media. Trevor looked like he might throw up. "You bastard," Chloe whispered. "You vindictive bastard." "I'm vindictive. You've been cheating on me for months, spending our money on hotel rooms, using your work email to send naked pictures to a married man, and I'm the vindictive one." "It wasn't supposed to happen like this," Trevor said suddenly. Everyone turned to look at him. It just happened." "No, Trevor," I replied. "It didn't just happen. You made a choice. Every time you snuck into my backyard, every time you lied to your wife, every time you helped Chloe plan to destroy me in court, those were choices." I walked over to where he was sitting and looked down at him. "How's Linda handling the news, by the way? I assume she's seen the video from the open house by now." Trevor's face crumpled. "She threw me out, filed for divorce yesterday." "Good for her." Chloe stood up abruptly, knocking over her chair. "I'm leaving." "Actually," I said, "I don't think you are." That's when Ricky walked in, followed by two other men I didn't recognize. "Sorry I'm late," Ricky said. "Traffic was murder." Chloe looked confused. "Who are these people?" "Well," I said, "Ricky, you know. The other two gentlemen are from Linda's divorce attorney's office. They're here to serve Trevor with some papers." Trevor went white. "What papers?" One of the men stepped forward. "Trevor Miles, you're being served with a subpoena to appear in divorce proceedings. Also, there's a restraining order preventing you from contacting Mrs. Linda Miles or coming within 500 feet of the family residence. And Chloe," I continued, "the gentleman behind him is from your firm. Apparently, Ms. Chen wants to see you first thing tomorrow morning. Something about termination procedures." The room erupted. Chloe started screaming at me, calling me every name in the book. Trevor tried to run for the door but found his way blocked by Ricky, who was grinning like this was the best entertainment he'd seen in years. Rita was still filming everything, probably already composing the social media posts that would spread this story throughout our entire social circle. "You want to know the really beautiful part?" I said, raising my voice over the chaos. "I didn't break a single law. Everything I did was completely legal. I just made sure people knew the truth about who you really are." The community center showdown should have been the end of it, but Chloe and Trevor weren't quite ready to accept defeat. 3 days later, I discovered they'd made one last desperate play. I was working late at the shop, trying to finish a transmission rebuild before the weekend, when my security system sent an alert to my phone. Someone was in the parking lot behind my garage. I killed the lights and moved to the window. Sure enough, there was Chloe's Mercedes parked next to Trevor's BMW. They were both dressed in dark clothes, moving toward the back entrance of my shop like amateur burglars. I'd been expecting something like this. After their public humiliation, I knew they'd be desperate to find some kind of leverage against me. Maybe they thought I had physical evidence hidden in the shop, or maybe they just wanted to vandalize the place out of spite. Either way, they'd picked the wrong night and the wrong target. I texted Ricky, "Need backup at the shop. Now." Then I grabbed the baseball bat I kept behind the counter and positioned myself near the back door. The lock-picking took them almost 10 minutes. Either they'd watched too many movies, or they were just naturally incompetent at crime. I could hear them whispering to each other, Chloe's voice sharp with frustration, and Trevor's responses getting more panicked by the minute. When the door finally opened, I was ready. "Evening, folks," I said, flipping on the lights. "Can I help you with something?" Chloe shrieked and jumped backward into Trevor, who stumbled and nearly fell. They looked like characters from a slapstick comedy, all dressed in black, carrying flashlights and a crowbar, caught red-handed in the most literal sense. "Jake!" Chloe gasped. "We were just what? Breaking into my business? That's a felony, Chloe. They teach you about felonies in law school?" Trevor had recovered his composure slightly. "We're looking for evidence." Evidence of what? You've been stalking us, harassing us. We know you have cameras and recording equipment. I started laughing. I couldn't help it. You think I've been stalking you? Trevor, you were sneaking into my house at night. Chloe, you were using company resources to coordinate an affair. I just paid attention. You destroyed our lives, Chloe screamed. No, I documented your choices. There's a difference. That's when Trevor made his second attempt to get physical with me. He came charging across the shop floor, crowbar raised above his head like some kind of medieval warrior. Thanks to Ricky's training, I was ready for him. I sidestepped his clumsy attack, grabbed his wrist, and used his own momentum to send him crashing into a stack of tires. The crowbar went flying, clattering across the concrete floor as Trevor landed in a heap of rubber and dust. You know what your problem is, Trevor? I said, standing over him. You're used to people who don't fight back. Chloe was backing toward the door, but I moved to block her path. Where are you going? We're just getting started. Let me leave, Jake, please. Not until we finish this conversation. That's when Ricky arrived with two of his gym buddies, both of whom looked like they could bench press a small car. Everything okay in here? Ricky asked, surveying the scene. Just fine. Chloe and Trevor were just leaving. But before they could go anywhere, I had one final surprise for them. Actually, there's something you both should know. Remember that restraining order Trevor got served with? Well, Chloe, you're about to get one too. I pulled out a manila envelope. I seem to be going through a lot of those lately, and handed it to her. Linda Miles is suing you for alienation of affection. Apparently, Texas still recognizes that as a civil tort. Her lawyer thinks she's got a pretty strong case, especially with all the evidence I provided. Chloe's hands were shaking as she opened the envelope. This is impossible. Read the amount she's asking for in damages. Chloe's face went white. $2 million? Trevor's been bragging about his income for months. Linda's lawyer thinks she's entitled to half of everything he would have earned during their marriage, plus punitive damages for emotional distress. Trevor struggled to his feet, covered in tire dust and motor oil. She can't do that. Actually, she can. And since you're both named as co-defendants, you're both liable for the full amount. I walked over to my workbench and picked up one more envelope. Oh, and Chloe? Your former boss asked me to give you this. She opened it with trembling hands. A bill? For all the company resources you used during your affair. Computers, phones, office space, legal databases. Ms. Chen's accountant was very thorough. Comes to about $50,000. I don't have $50,000. I know. That's why there's also a lien against your half of our house. The fight went out of both of them at once. Chloe slumped against the wall, still holding the legal papers. Trevor sat down heavily on a tire, his head in his hands. You win, Chloe said quietly. Is that what you wanted to hear? You win. This was never about winning, Chloe. This was about consequences. I walked to the front of the shop and opened the main door. You're both free to go, but if I ever catch you on my property again, I'm calling the police, and next time, I won't be as understanding. They left without another word, walking to their cars like zombies. I watched them drive away, then turned to Ricky and his friends. Thanks for coming. Anytime, brother. You okay? I looked around my shop, the place I'd built from nothing, the business that had supported my family for 15 years, the sanctuary where I'd figured out how to rebuild my life. Yeah, I said. I'm better than okay. 6 months later, the divorce was final. Chloe had been forced to sell her half of the house to pay her legal bills and the judgment in Linda's lawsuit. She'd moved into a small apartment across town and was working for a public defender's office, the only place that would hire her after the scandal. Trevor had disappeared entirely. Rumor had it he'd moved to Arizona and was selling insurance under his middle name. Rita had tried to stay neutral for about a week, before deciding that being on my side was better for her social standing. She was now dating Will Morrison, who'd divorced Tara after she'd admitted to having her own affair with a tennis instructor. As for me, I was doing just fine. Business was booming. Turns out, people respected a man who stood up for himself. I'd bought a new house closer to my shop, with a garage big enough for my own projects and a yard where I could barbecue without worrying about nosy neighbors. My daughter Olivia spent every other weekend with me, and those were the best days of my life. She was smart enough to understand that sometimes adults make bad choices, and wise enough not to blame herself for her mother's mistakes. On this particular Saturday evening, I was in my garage working on a 1967 Mustang I'd bought at auction, a project car that would probably take me years to restore properly. The radio was playing classic rock, I had a cold beer within reach, and for the first time in years, I felt completely at peace. That's when my phone rang. Unknown number. Hello? Jake, it's Trevor. I almost hung up, but curiosity got the better of me. What do you want, Trevor? I wanted to say I'm sorry. For everything. Okay? I know it doesn't change anything, but I needed you to know that I never meant for it to go as far as it did. Trevor, you snuck into my house for months. You helped my wife plan to destroy me in court. You lied to everyone, including your own wife. Exactly how far did you mean for it to go? Long silence on the other end. I don't know, he finally said. I guess I wasn't thinking. No? You were thinking? You just weren't thinking about the consequences. How do you do it? He asked suddenly. Do what? Live with yourself after destroying so many lives. I set down my wrench and walked to the garage door, looking out at the sunset over my new neighborhood. I didn't destroy anything, Trevor. I just refused to be a victim. There's a difference. Chloe's life is ruined. She lost everything. Chloe made her choices. So did you. I just made sure there were consequences for those choices. And you think that makes you the good guy? I smiled, even though he couldn't see it. I think it makes me someone who doesn't let people walk all over him anymore. Someone who fights back when people try to destroy his life. Someone who believes that actions have consequences, even when those actions hurt people you're supposed to love. I hope you're happy, Trevor said bitterly. You know what, Trevor? I am happy. For the first time in years, I'm genuinely happy. I sleep well at night. I look forward to getting up in the morning. I don't spend my time worrying about what people are saying behind my back because I know I haven't done anything wrong. I paused, watching a neighbor walk his dog down the street. Can you say the same thing? The line went dead. I put the phone back in my pocket and returned to my workbench. The Mustang's engine was going to need a complete rebuild, but I had time. I had patience, and I had the satisfaction of knowing that when I was done, it would be something beautiful and powerful and honest, just like my life.